Hollywood spent the 80s absolutely convinced that fantasy films were box office poison, and studios kept shelving productions mid-shoot, panicking over disastrous test screenings and watching their directors battle impossible budgets while critics waited to tear everything apart. Executives had zero faith in sword-wielding heroes, mystical quests, or those clunky stop-motion monsters that looked cheap even back then. Turns out they were spectacularly wrong, because these 8 disasters survived to become the most influential fantasy classics you grew up obsessing over. The Beastmaster should have been Don Coscarelli's ticket to mainstream fantasy glory, but instead he created a sword and sorcery epic so plagued by production chaos that the original film negative literally vanished into someone's house and was never seen again. Young Prince Dar gets blessed with the ability to telepathically communicate with animals, watches his family get butchered by the psychotic sorcerer Max, then spends the rest of the runtime bonding with a black tiger, a pair of ferrets, and a hawk, while teaming up with slave girl Kiri, warrior Seth, and rightful heir Tao to storm Max's stronghold and stop his plan to sacrifice children for dark magic power. Coscarelli openly admitted the original negative ended up stored in a private residence, where its fate became completely unknown, which means every restoration you've ever watched came from secondary and third-generation prints, explaining why even modern remasters look weirdly soft and imperfect. The animal scenes turned into absolute nightmares, because producers told Coscarelli there were no Black Panthers available, so they used 3 different tigers dyed black for every single shoot, and every time the dye faded, production ground to a complete halt for touch-ups. Child actors couldn't go anywhere near the tiger for safety reasons, forcing last-minute script revisions where emotional animal encounters got replaced with stand-ins or short extras and wigs, while a marksman stood off-camera with a loaded rifle in case things went sideways. Tanya Roberts got cast after producers overrode Coscarelli's preference for Demi Moore, and her waterfall scenes got so heavily publicized that she did a nude Playboy spread to promote the film, instantly transforming her into an early 80s sex symbol. The movie bombed theatrically, but HBO and TBS aired it so relentlessly that an entire generation grew up with the running joke that HBO stood for "Hey, Beastmaster's on," with those endless cable broadcasts and VHS rentals, rewriting the film's legacy from box office disaster into mythic TV experience that kids quoted in basements across America. The Princess Bride barely registered as a blip when it hit theaters in 1987, and the journey to create Rob Reiner's fairy tale masterpiece nearly collapsed when the central sword fight became too technically perfect to actually work on screen. The framing device follows a grandfather reading his sick grandson. This rollicking adventure where farm girl Buttercup loses her beloved Wesley to the sea, gets forced into marriage with the odious Prince Humperdinck, then gets kidnapped by scheming Vizzini, gentle giant Fezzik, and revenge-obsessed swordsman Inigo Montoya, before the mysterious man in black reveals himself as Wesley and reunites with Buttercup to thwart Humperdinck's murderous power grab. Cary Elwes and Mandy Patinkin trained so obsessively with world-class fencing instructors that their duel atop the cliffs of insanity zipped by in barely 60 seconds. Way too fast for the elaborate set and audience expectations, forcing Reiner to send them back to stretch every flourish and add fake-outs until the scene became this mesmerizing multi-minute ballet of wit and steel. Both actors insisted on doing their own stunts despite the injuries piling up, with Patinkin actually cracking a rib trying to hold in laughter during Billy Crystal's improvised scenes as Miracle Max. The film landed somewhere between modest hit and forgettable curiosity during its theatrical run, but VHS and cable rewrote its entire destiny when families and college students started renting worn-out copies until the thing became a generational bedtime story with scenes memorized in dorms and living rooms across the country. Decades later, when remake rumors started swirling, social media exploded with fans, critics, and even cast members united in protest that remaking The Princess Bride was inconceivable, creating this rare cultural moment where a box office underdog earned the kind of fierce guardianship usually reserved for untouchable myths. The backlash proved this forgotten oddity had transformed into something beyond cult classic status, becoming a modern fable that an entire generation refused to let Hollywood touch. The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai across the 8th dimension remains the most gloriously baffling cult classic of the 80s, and W.D. Richter's sci-fi fever dream nearly imploded when studio executives couldn't figure out what they were actually funding. Polymath hero Buckaroo Banzai juggles careers as a neurosurgeon, physicist, test pilot, and rock band frontman while inventing the oscillation overthruster with his mentor Dr. Hikita, accidentally discovering hostile red electroids from the 8th dimension led by the possessed Dr. Emilio Lizardo, who are disguised as defense contractors building an alien spacecraft to rescue their imprisoned comrades and trigger nuclear World War III. Director Richter and writer Earl Mac Rouse crafted this insane blend of sci-fi, rock music, and pulp adventure that left studio suits completely baffled, while the eclectic casting of Peter Weller alongside John Lithgow and Jeff Goldblum created this unconventional set dynamic, where scenes got constantly rewritten or improvised on the fly, sparking friction about story direction and character interpretations. The original cut included a flashback with Jamie Lee Curtis playing Buckaroo's mother and a bombing orchestrated by villain Hanoi Zan, but the studio axed it for pacing reasons, leaving the theatrical release feeling fragmented and confusing to audiences who had no idea what mythology they were supposed to understand. Other scenes got trimmed or altered in post-production, with persistent rumors about longer cuts existing somewhere in vault limbo, though no official director's cut has ever surfaced despite decades of fan campaigns. The movie bombed spectacularly at the box office, but video rentals and late-night cable transformed it into this enduring phenomenon, where its complexity and insider references attracted devotees who quoted the outlandish dialogue verbatim at midnight screenings. The phrase Buckaroo Banzai became shorthand for baffling yet lovable cult cinema, with fans embracing its intentionally dense mythology and the eternal hope for a sequel that was teased in the ending but never materialized, cementing its reputation as the hidden gem of 80s sci-fi that demands multiple viewings to even begin understanding. Ladyhawke should have been Richard Donner's romantic fantasy triumph, but creative tension between the director and Matthew Broderick nearly derailed the production, while conservative groups lost their minds over a bishop casting evil curses on passionate lovers. Medieval thief Philippe the Mouse Gaston gets caught up in the tragic curse binding nobleman Navarre and Lady Isabeau, who transform into a wolf by night and a hawk by day, respectively, forever separated, in human form by a vengeful bishop's dark magic until Mouse helps them break the spell. Donner's vision for epic romance and action constantly clashed with Broderick's desire to inject more humor and lightness into his character, creating this ongoing creative battle that played out across the entire shoot. While Rutger Hauer and Michelle Pfeiffer developed their own private rapport off-screen to capture the lovers' chemistry despite barely sharing scenes in human form, Pfeiffer grew increasingly uncomfortable with the falconry sequences that required extended outdoor shoots in brutal weather conditions, with the production pushing through despite her visible distress about handling the birds. Conservative religious critics went after the film for its portrayal of lustful nobles and passionate relationships, interpreting the bishop's curse as a veiled critique of church authority and morality that resulted in a PG-13 rating, with warnings in some regions and moderate edits to tone down suggestive content. The film did modestly well theatrically, but cable TV airings and home video in the late 80s and 90s transformed it into this beloved family favorite, with its lush cinematography and memorable synth soundtrack by Andrew Powell and Tangerine Dream, creating this unique blend of dark magic and heartfelt storytelling. Midnight screenings and VHS rentals introduced new generations to its genre-mixing approach, making it a touchstone for medieval romance films that fantasy enthusiasts still cite as proof that sometimes the most troubled productions create the most enduring fairy tales. The Golden Child represents Eddie Murphy, at peak box office power, making the weirdest possible career choice. And the production nearly collapsed under the weight of trying to blend his urban comedy persona with mystical Tibetan fantasy that left him visibly uncomfortable for months. Social worker Chandler Jarrell gets recruited by mysterious Ki Nang as the chosen one, destined to rescue a kidnapped Tibetan boy with miraculous powers from the demon Sardonum Spa, leading him through supernatural trials involving magical birds, bottomless caverns, and the mystical Ajanti dagger before the final demon showdown. Murphy chose this project over 20 other scripts at Paramount because the supernatural angle intrigued him, but the original Raymond Chandler-style thriller got completely rewritten into comedy after he signed on, creating this tonal patchwork that made him increasingly uneasy throughout filming. Behind the scenes, Murphy struggled to connect with the fantasy elements and special effects work supervised by Industrial Light and Magic's Ken Ralston, where complex go-motion animation for demons and magical creatures required patience totally foreign to his usual grounded urban comedy sets. The child actor playing the Golden Child was actually a girl named Jasmine Lauren Relit, bringing quiet intensity to her unique role, while Murphy scratched a sacred prayer wheel like a DJ turntable in scenes that perfectly captured his irreverent clash with the mystical themes. Murphy's trademark energy felt intermittent on set, according to contemporaries, with the PG-13 rating limiting his edgy humor and forcing him to tailor his approach for broader family audiences, creating creative tensions as he navigated between his stand-up persona and this bizarre supernatural material. Early drafts included darker, more violent scenes involving Numspa's demon form that got trimmed to secure that rating, while a deleted flashback featuring Chandler meeting an ancient Tibetan temple guardian got axed for pacing, leaving continuity gaps that occasionally confused viewers. The movie earned mixed critical reception and moderate box office returns, but VHS rentals and late-night cable in the late 80s transformed it into this nostalgic cult favorite, where Murphy's charisma and the fantasy-adventure blend appealed to family audiences, who made his flippant reactions and wisecracking lines part of the film's lasting legacy. Excalibur should have been John Boorman's crowning achievement in Arthurian cinema, but his notoriously brutal production methods and freezing Irish weather nearly broke his entire cast, while religious groups attacked the film's graphic sexuality and pagan magic. The legendary saga follows young Arthur pulling the magical sword from the stone under Merlin's guidance to unite warring Britain and establish Camelot, only to watch his kingdom crumble when Queen Guinevere's love for Sir Lancelot shatters the Round Table's sacred brotherhood, while illegitimate son Mordred plots to seize the throne, culminating in the Battle of Camelot, where Arthur falls mortally wounded. Boorman's demanding directorial approach pushed actors to deliver performances, blending theatrical grandeur with brutal realism, while filming under relentless cold, wind, and rain that tested everyone's endurance and created genuine on-set tensions throughout the shoot. Helen Mirren endured extensive makeup sessions and dangerous stunt work as Morgan Le Fay in those harsh Irish conditions, with the physical challenges deepening her connection to the darkly mystical character, but straining her patience and creating friction with the production team. The elaborate sword fight choreography became legendary nightmares as actors battled in cumbersome medieval armor through unpredictable weather, with complex sequences involving Lancelot, Arthur, and Mordred demanding stunt doubles and close coordination that left the cast physically exhausted, but creating this rawness that became the film's signature gritty aesthetic. Nicol Williamson and Patrick Stewart worked under crushing expectations to deliver legendary figure portrayals, sometimes requiring endless takes that forged deep, but occasionally fraught, artistic bonds across a charged atmosphere, where heavy themes of betrayal and mysticism demanded emotional vulnerability. Religious groups lost their minds over the graphic violence and sexual content, including racy adultery scenes and battle brutality, with some objecting to the unvarnished treatment of sacred legends and pagan magic depictions that led to edits and bans in conservative regions. The film found appreciation on release, but VHS and midnight screenings in the 80s and 90s transformed it into this cult masterpiece, with Trevor Jones's memorable soundtrack and stylized visuals gaining passionate devotees who revered its blend of fantasy art and tragic storytelling. Late-night cable broadcasts invited repeated viewings that solidified its reputation as a dark, immersive Arthurian epic where Boorman's refusal to sanitize violence or romance pushed boundaries of medieval storytelling and created an enduring touchstone for generations of fantasy fans who embraced its enigmatic poetic brutality. Highlander became Russell Mulcahy's cult masterpiece, despite Christopher Lambert barely speaking English and Sean Connery playing a Spaniard with a Scottish accent while filming in freezing Irish weather that nearly destroyed the entire cast. 16th century Scottish warrior Conor MacLeod survives a fatal battle, wound to discover he's immortal, gets cast out by his clan for his strange survival, then he roams the earth for centuries, guided by a mentor who shows him that immortals can only die by decapitation until the story lands in 1985 New York, where Conor faces the brutal Kurgan while a forensic scientist investigates mysterious sword murders. Lambert was a French-American actor who struggled massively with English dialogue and the heavy Scottish accent requirement, practicing extensively but never quite nailing it, with his distinct pronunciation becoming part of the film's weird cult appeal, as he described feeling like an outsider on set while training in medieval sword fighting through harsh outdoor shoots. Sean Connery took a genuine mentorship role off-screen, guiding Lambert and younger cast members through the demanding production spread across Ireland and New York, with their developing friendship helping ease tensions while Connery's box office draw and classical gravitas elevated the fantasy elements despite the production's unevenness. Clancy Brown endured rigorous stunt work and fight choreography as the Kurgan, performing brutal scenes in heavy leather costumes and prosthetic makeup while improvising lines and injecting personality into what was essentially a force of nature, with his fearsome growl making him the ultimate foil that helped the fantasy thriller blend succeed. Brown later embraced the cult status and remained fiercely proud of his contribution, while the film's theatrical performance was modest, but VHS rentals and cable broadcasts transformed it into this generational phenomenon, where Lambert's outsider energy and the mythic immortal warriors concept resonated with audiences who made there can be only one part of pop culture vocabulary. Clash of the Titans represented Ray Harryhausen's final stop-motion masterpiece, and Laurence Olivier's last major role, with the legendary production becoming a grueling test of patience as actors performed against empty space while waiting for creatures to be animated months later. Mortal hero Perseus, son of Zeus, embarks on this epic quest to save Princess Andromeda and Argos from vengeful goddess Hades by battling monsters, including the Kraken and Medusa, aided by magical gifts like winged sandals and a shield, ultimately using Medusa's petrifying gaze to defeat the Kraken and restore peace between gods and mortals. Olivier brought classical gravitas to Zeus in one of his final film roles, but increasingly struggled with lengthy makeup sessions and arduous shooting days that taxed his aging body, though his professionalism kept morale high even as other actors grappled with the fantasy-heavy production's technical challenges. Harry Hamlin underwent intense physical training for his career breakthrough as Perseus, embracing sword-fighting choreography designed to mimic classical Greek combat while balancing mortal vulnerability with myth-inspired bravery, later recalling the experience as equal parts excitement and frustration at the primitive special effects and elephantine prosthetics. Harryhausen's iconic stop-motion animation of the Kraken and Medusa required actors to perform against invisible foes or props, demanding imaginative effort, where physical movements and reactions became crucial to selling the illusion, while prolonged waits and multiple takes tested focus as animations got overlaid months after principal photography wrapped. The blend of human performance with pioneering effects became a defining feature actors reminisced about with mixed fondness and challenge, creating this lasting magical cinematic quality that elevated Greek mythology into blockbuster entertainment. The film found modest theatrical success, but VHS and cable broadcasts in the 80s cemented its status as family viewing staple, with Harryhausen's creatures and the grand mythological adventure appealing to generations who discovered that sometimes the most patient productions create the most enduring fantasy spectacles.